This video is for those parents that bring strangers into their home. They should be careful. Hi guys. If you find this video interesting, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. In the heart of Lagos, amidst the constant hustle of the city, Ada and Chimobi live with their parents in a small well-kept house. It was a home full of love, but also full of emptiness at times. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Obi, work long hours in the city. Each morning, before the sun rose, they were already out the door. The traffic in Lagos was notoriously unpredictable, and both Mr. and Mrs. Obi carriers demanded their presence at work early and late into the evening. Ada, a playful 5-year-old, adored her parents and felt safe in their embrace, but as they left every morning, her heart sank. She clung to her mother's leg with big sad eyes. "I don't want you to go, Mama," she would always whisper, her small hands gripping the fabric of mother's dress. "I'll be back soon, my sweet girl," Mrs. Obi would always say softly, kissing Ada's forehead. "Take care of your brother for me, okay?" "Don't worry, Mama," Chimobi, who was 7 years old, would say with the seriousness only an older sibling could muster. "I would look after Ada, you don't have to worry." But as soon as the door closed behind them, the house fell silent. It was always just the two of them, Ada and Chimobi, left to fend for themselves during the long hours of the day. To help with their parents' demanding schedules, the Obis hired Auntie Ngozi, a woman who had worked with them for several years. Auntie Ngozi was efficient in her work, keeping the house clean, preparing meals, and doing her best to ensure that Ada and Chimobi had everything they needed. She was an older woman, always present but somewhat detached, and the children quickly noticed that her presence didn't quite fill the emotional gap left by their parents. Auntie Ngozi's world seemed to revolve around her phone and the television. At first, it wasn't bad. The children watched cartoons, played games, and filled their times with drawing and reading. But as the days turned into weeks, Chimobi began to notice something strange. Auntie Ngozi would spend hours on her phone, tapping away, scrolling through social media, or watching videos. Sometimes, she would beckon them over to show them something on her screen. "Come look at this funny video," Auntie Ngozi would say, her voice casual and detached. Chimobi, always a cautious boy, had his doubts. He was starting to feel uneasy about these videos, even though they seemed harmless at first. Some were funny animal clips, others were strange jokes, and then there were those that made him feel a little bit uncomfortable. He didn't know why, but he could sense that they weren't the things he was supposed to be saying. One afternoon, when the sunlight streamed through the windows, Ada was sitting on the rug, playing with her dolls. Auntie Ngozi walked in, holding her phone, and a slight smile on her face. "Come see this video," she said, as if it were an ordinary part of the day. Chimobi, sensing something off, quickly moved in front of his sister, but it was too late. Ada, always curious, was already standing by Auntie Ngozi's side, watching the screen. The video that played was not the one for children. It was strange, disturbing, and made Chimobi feel a mix of discomfort and confusion. He tried to look away, but the images burned into his mind. "Auntie, what is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "This doesn't seem right." Auntie Ngozi, unfazed, shrugged. "It is just a funny video, Chimobi. You guys take everything so seriously." Chimaobi wanted to protest, but he didn't know what to say. He had always thought that some things weren't meant for children, but now he was left with more questions than answers. His gut told him that this wasn't the kind of thing that should be in front of his younger sister. Yet, Auntie Ngozi made it seem so casual. Ada, still young and curious, didn't fully understand what was happening, but she felt a strange sensation in her stomach. "Auntie, why are they doing that?" she asked, her voice small and unsure. Auntie Ngozi laughed again, but this time, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, don't worry about it," she said dismissively. "It's just a funny thing for grown-ups. You understand when you're older." But Chimaobi, despite his limited understanding, felt a sense of unease that stayed with him long after Auntie Ngozi moved on to something else. He tried to put it out of his mind, but the image kept resurfacing in his thoughts. Days turned into weeks, and the effects of what they had seen began to take root. Ada, in her innocent way, tried to replicate what she had seen on the video. One day, while playing in her room, she asked Chimaobi, "Do you want to play the game we saw on Auntie Ngozi's phone?" Chimaobi stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "You know," she said, her eyes wide open. "The thing the people were doing on the video." Chimaobi froze. He knew something was wrong. "No, Ada, that is not a game. That is not something that we should be doing. Auntie Ngozi shouldn't have shown us that." But Ada, in her childlike innocence, didn't understand. To her, the video was a game, something fun and playful that grown-ups did. She thought that if she tried it too, it would be just like one of the pretend games she played with her dolls. The line between reality and what she had seen blurred her mind. Chimaobi, despite his internal alarm bells, didn't know how to stop her. The confusion and discomfort were taking root in his own mind as well. But he didn't want to disappoint his sister. As a week went by, Ada and Chimaobi's behavior began to change. Ada, who had been a bubbly, joyful child, became withdrawn and quiet. She no longer ran to greet her parents with the same enthusiasm. Instead, she seemed preoccupied, often staring into space. She would play with her dolls in a way that disturbed Chimaobi, imitating what she had seen on Auntie Ngozi's phone. Chimaobi, too, began to show signs of emotional distress. He became more secretive, often isolating himself in his room. He started having trouble sleeping at night. His mind plagued by disturbing thoughts and images that he couldn't explain. He became increasingly anxious, avoiding eye contact with his parents and often shrugging off their attempts to talk to him. Meanwhile, Auntie Ngozi continued her role in the household, unaware of the deepening confusion and turmoil that has taken root in the children's life. She remained detached, focusing on her own devices and spending less and less time with the children. One quiet afternoon, Auntie Ngozi just picked the kids from school and slept off after watching Nigerian movies on YouTube. Chimaobi came to Ada and said, "I am now ready to practice what we saw on Auntie Ngozi's phone," and that is how it started. This continued for a very long time till the kids became teenagers. At this point, Ada no longer liked doing it because it has become painful because Chimaobi was no longer, but the case was reversed for Chimaobi because he had now become addicted to it. Because he wasn't only doing it with Ada, he was also doing it with Auntie Ngozi. In fact, Auntie Ngozi introduced it first to him when he was just a child, hence the reason he had a change of mind to start doing it with Ada. At this point, Chimaobi is now 12 years old and his sister 10 years old. On that fateful day, they had just returned from school and went straight to the microwave to heat up their food. Auntie Ngozi wasn't around because she went to visit her relative. Mom was feeling very sick on this day, so she couldn't stay at the office till the close of the day. She tried but she couldn't, so she had to go home immediately after break. When she arrived home, it was awkwardly quiet. She called the names of the children but none of them responded. She went upstairs immediately, flung the door open and met the shock of her life. She ran downstairs immediately and with tears in her eyes, she called her husband. Chimaobi and Ada immediately put on their clothes and followed immediately. They now stood and began crying and pleading to Mom. In some minutes' time, Mr. Okafor came back from work and met the saint. Auntie Ngozi came back as well just right in time and met the saint. Chimaobi told his parents how it all started and how Auntie Ngozi forced them to watch adult content on her phone. Auntie Ngozi's expression didn't flatter. She simply stood there. Mr. Okafor's pulse raced. How could they have ever allowed this to happen? The realization that they have been so oblivious to the subtle manipulations and harmful influences at play in their own home made him feel nauseous. His mind kept returning to that moment. His daughter, sitting on the couch, asking questions that no child her age should even have the vocabulary to ask. Mrs. Okafor, who had been quiet throughout the conversation with Auntie Ngozi, finally spoke up. Her voice was quiet but filled with sorrow. I don't understand how we have missed this, how we let him influence our children like this, she said, her eyes meeting Auntie Ngozi's with expression of disbelief. Auntie Ngozi gave a small disarming smile. I was just trying to help them. They are growing up in a world where they have to face things like this sooner or later. It's not like I showed them anything terrible. I was just making sure they were prepared. Mr. Okafor felt his anger bubbling up again, prepared his past. His voice rising in disbelief, prepared for what? To grow up too fast. To lose their childhood before it even has a chance to take root. You don't get to decide what they are ready for. That is our job as parents. Mrs. Okafor stepped forward, her gaze hardening. You will leave immediately. We will not tolerate any more of this behavior. She turned to her husband. I'll go pack her things. Chuka watched as Adis left the room. He could hear her moving about upstairs, the sound of the drawers opening and closing. Auntie Ngozi, on the other hand, made no move to leave. She simply stood there, her calm demeanor marking a subtle difference. You don't have to do this, she said after a long pause. I have been with you for years. I'm practically family now. Family doesn't betray trust, Mr. Okafor replied. You have crossed a line that cannot be erased. Auntie Ngozi didn't argue anymore. She simply gave a nod, walked to the door and stood there, seemingly unfazed by the gravity of the moment. For a fleeting second, Mr. Okafor wondered whether she even realized the harm that she had caused. But it was too late for a second guessing. The damage had already been done. As Auntie Ngozi left the house, she looked back once, her expression unreadable. Then she walked out of the door, leaving the Okafors to face the aftermath of her betrayal. Over the following week, the Okafors made deliberate efforts to strengthen their relationship with their children. They no longer allowed their jobs to take precedence over their family. They spent more quality time together, going to the movies, having family dinners and talking openly about their day. Ada once again became the bright, curious girl who loved her books, her study, and the adventures of childhood. She had become more communicative with her parents. Chimaobi, who had deeply been influenced by Auntie Ngozi's reckless behavior, found his balance again. Okafor, despite the painful lessons they had learned, began to feel a sense of peace once again. Their home was now theirs once more, filled with love and peace. In the end, the Okafors emerged from this difficult chapter stronger than before. As for Auntie Ngozi, her departure was a harsh reminder of the dangers of misplaced trust and the devastating consequences that can come from allowing someone to take advantage of that trust. The Okafors were determined that such a betrayal would never happen again. They would remain vigilant and they would never let anything, no matter how busy their life became, tear apart the bond they had as a family.